Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. Romania's presidential election faces uncertainty as the country's top court reviews whether to cancel last Sunday's vote. Now, the head of Romania's Electoral Commission, Toni Grebla, announced that a rerun could be held on December 15 with a runoff vote on December 29, but it's going to depend on the court's decision to be announced this Friday afternoon. Allegations of Russian interference and fraud have sparked protests, and the court has ordered a recount of nearly 9.5 million ballots. Now, joining me now to discuss the details is Radu Albu-Comănescu, Visegrad Insight Fellow, Romania. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us here on World Talks this afternoon. So, Radu, tell us first, we still are waiting for the court's decision. Any ideas to when we will officially have the results?
Let's say that tomorrow morning, the latest, would be the plausible answer, given the fact that even if there are comments pertaining to how not clearly legal this procedure is, because this is very innovative, to put it like that, in legislative terms and in juridical terms. The atmosphere in the state institutions is that the one of let's say, a state of siege. So we need to take radical decisions because we are confronted with a radical situation, or extraordinary decisions because we're confronted to an extraordinary situation. So if nothing is announced by this evening, tomorrow morning, definitely things will be made public. And the question is, what will happen next? Because in the end, this is beyond unprecedented. There are a couple of factors that changed completely the direction that the elections took. First, the rise of this individual. So may he be, for instance, a centrist, may he be a completely different profile, it would still be a surprise. This incredible rise coming from basically nowhere in the polls. And of course, the polls can be discussed because we did have some problems with the honesty of the polls. And I can tell you that based on the observations of many independent pollsters. The second problem with this incredible situation is related to the lack of legislation that would regulate extraordinary cases of interference. So time was needed in order to clear out what has happened. So we continued. It's a basically empirical discovery.
Radu, you mentioned so many interesting things here, but before I get into Georgescu, let me ask you this. What mechanism does Romania have in place to investigate and resolve these accusations against what might have happened? Let's talk about that first before we get into the details.
Yeah, well, Romania used two instruments in this case. First of all, cybersecurity, which is attached to the Romanian intelligence, and also rather comprehensive dialogue, I would call it, with TikTok, who has the headquarters in Europe, in Dublin. So, of course, these were not transparent discussions, meaning that a full and precise report of how the debates evolved was not made public verbatim. But what we know is that initially TikTok refused to take any responsibility for the incredible number of alternative profiles this individual had. He had more than 100 with various denominations that were active and that were basically flooding the newsfeed of any TikToker in Romania with messages about Georgescu, about vote Georgescu, about which are the opinions of Georgescu, and so on. All these largely were unmarked as electoral messages, because normally they should have been marked. And it was only with a late reaction that TikTok admitted to take them down. They did so, but only a couple. So you can imagine the massive amount of propaganda was still there. Secondly, what was discovered is that Romanians use massively TikTok for political information. 8.9 million users. This came as a surprise because most of our politicians focus on, I would now call them old recipe mass media and platforms, social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. It didn't work. Basically, the entire battlefield was embodied by TikTok. And then let's say that a third instrument is now the security legislation that it belongs to a body which is called the Supreme Council for State Security. Mm-hmm. And they took the decision to analyze and to see if they can interpret this as a foreign intrusion, foreign influence, and which are the instruments to apply to such case. And this is when we had indeed the Constitutional Court coming in as a player.
Definitely are questions asking of how he managed to use this algorithm in TikTok in order to rise, of course, high on these trending topics. But Radu, let me ask you this. I mean, in the beginning, you mentioned that the reality is that we don't know, right, which way the result is going to go, what the court is going to rule. But let me ask you this. What are the potential regional or European implications of this political uncertainty in Romania? I mean, should Georgescu become successful?
I can tell that it's, in terms of home affairs, in terms of Romanian economy, there is already an impact because suddenly investors sensed instability and banks reacted, the stock exchange reacted, the Romanian currency decreased. So we already had a minor impact waiting for a maybe larger one. I'm always wondering, what would a win mean in terms of institutional practices and policies, foreign policies and domestic policies. And of course, one can say, well, the prerogatives of the president are ultimately limited by other state institutions, from constitutional court to the parliament, to the mandate of the government, so on and so forth. But let's take those out and imagine a script where he does really have a full power. The problem is that we don't know if what he states today is really him, or is rather an agenda that was designed to get into power, meaning that he addressed problems that were studied for 2 years before, and he had a very keen, or his team had a very keen sense of the public psychology, public discontent, and almost this feeling of the need for a revolution, a deep change, because most, and this is a bit true, actually quite true, most of the electorate in Romania is tired to see the same faces, the same voices, the same policies, rather claimed than applied. And this may come as a bill to pay for the traditional political system.
Right,
Radu,
Sorry, let me ask you this because we're almost out of time and I really would like to know your take on my next question to you. How might, again, right, I mean, we're making assumptions here because we don't have the official results just as of yet. However, how might the outcomes of this presidential election influence Romania's parliamentary elections?
Oh, it already impacted the public sympathy, to put it like that. We saw a rise in the trend in sympathy for the extreme right. So AUR, which is the extreme right in Romania right now, seems to be heading towards 40%, which is not going to be a majority, but definitely influential, based on the possibility of other parties to build a coalition and a durable coalition, which is a very sensitive point. So with this party as an instrument putting pressure on the legislation that is going to be created, I think that Romania is risking a change in various policies, from partly disconnecting from the single market to changes in foreign policy in the relationship with the EU, NATO and Ukraine. So therefore, the stakes are really high.
And I guess we will have to see until later today for an official decision from the court on the result of these first round of elections. Thank you so much, Radu Albu-Comănescu, Visegrad Insight Fellow in Romania, for being with us
My pleasure. Thank you.
This afternoon on World Talks. And that completes this edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.